So thanks again for joining us today, April the 1st, which is April Fool's Day. So hopefully you didn't think this was a joke. I appreciate you taking time to join us. I'm Peter Hornberger, and I work at Penn State Abington as both a lecturer and a coordinator of the Penn State Abington LaunchBox. I'll talk about those things in just a moment. But again, I just want to remind you that we are going to be recording today's session. That session will be made available through the Penn State Startup Week website for any students, faculty, or staff that might have wanted to join in on today's session, but were unable to because of schedules, conflicts, or maybe they were just doing something else at the time. So what I want to do is also introduce you to a couple people on the call that I think will matter. And one of the most important ones on the call is Marisa Gonzalez, who is one of the LaunchBox amplifiers at Penn State Abington LaunchBox. And she's also going to be our co-host today. So she's going to help with organizing, evaluating any questions that you might have, and people can write those in the chat. So Marisa, you want to say hello and give any advice on how to get questions through to me?
Hi guys, I'm Marisa. I think the best way for you to probably get questions or like have your questions answered, make sure they're clear. And also, I just pick ones that I feel like would help the entire event or students in the entire event. So yeah, sadly, I won't be picking all of them, but I'll be picking a good amount. So.
Marisa is good at this, and there might be some questions that we just don't get to. We apologize. We'll try to get to as many as we possibly can. We've got a couple other faculty on the line. I want to give Dylan a chance. Dylan's a professor here at Penn State Abington as well. So Dylan, I'm just going to let you say hello. Sorry, you're on mute, Dylan. We'll get you. There you go.
Hey,
all right.
How are you?
We're good.
I got nothing really to say. Let's get started.
Cool. All right. And one other person, I just want to turn it over to Alan Layman out at Penn State York. And Alan, thanks for joining us today. And Alan, just so people can be aware, what are some things about your program out at Penn State York?
Yeah, so I am Alan Layman, as Peter said, and I work at Penn State York, and I'm the director of the Graham Fellows Program for Entrepreneurial Leadership. So we're really designed to take students from being students to being leaders in industry as young professionals. And so, you know, there's an entrepreneurial thinking component as well as a leadership component. And I've recently taken over the lead role of our LaunchBox, nice. Which has been more or less non-existent over the past 2 years. And so hopefully we will revitalize that. There's a ton of great entrepreneurial resources in York County. And so the best way for us to have an impact is to leverage those all into a central location where everybody's able to access one another and communicate effectively.
Good. Thanks, Alan, and thanks for joining us and sharing in today's session. So let me just give you a couple more quick housekeeping things before we get rolling with the content. Again, we're in Startup Week. We're pretty much in the middle of it now at April 1st. And thanks again for adapting and joining us on some of these virtual sessions that we have. But let me just give you a reminder of what Small Startup Week is all about. So each spring, Penn State Startup Week brings together the best and brightest Penn State student and alumni entrepreneurs and innovators for a week-long entrepreneurship immersion and celebration of the magic that happens when Penn State's inspired doers put their great ideas into action. I just introduced you to a couple of those, Dylan Weissman and Alan Layman, but this is all part of a larger vision of Invent Penn State, which is a Commonwealth-wide initiative that spurs economic development, job creation, and particularly student career success. And amongst those things, there are programs like the LaunchBox, and at Penn State Abington, our LaunchBox is a part of the Invent Penn State mission. And our mission is to engage the community, entrepreneurs, and students to enhance the vibrancy of the entrepreneurial ecosystem. Our key focus is to create a culture of innovation around our LaunchBox to increase the number of entrepreneurs in our community. So thank you guys for joining us. Today we are going to be talking about design thinking today. And I just want to do some things with some polls first, just to figure out what's going on. Because as we're going to find out, one of the first things with design thinking, it's a process of creatively solving problems. But one of the first steps is showing empathy, empathizing, and connecting with people. And this online format is new to most of us. And I just wanted to reach out. I'm going to put up a poll in just a second. And I just would like to see, how are you accessing today's event? So you should see a poll question popping up on your computers in just a moment. If you could just share what your thoughts are, how are you accessing that? This is going well, so people are putting information in. Excellent. So thank you guys for participating in that. I'm going to let that go for just a couple more seconds as we go through here. We're going to have a bunch of these polls today, again, as part of design thinking. The process is supposed to be customer-centered and focused on the user. And in this case, I think those of you attending, looks like we've got about 30 or so on the call right now, are part of that process. So thank you guys for participating in the poll. And let me get started with this process. We're going to come back to some more polls here in just a moment. But design thinking is, as I mentioned, it's more of a process. It's not necessarily a single way to solve a problem, but it's a different way to solve a problem than I think what we traditionally work with, where we assume that we know what the problem is and we start trying to come up with solutions. Design thinking has a bit more broad way of looking at a process of solving that. And it's, I think, slightly different than what we would traditionally look at as problem solving, in that I mentioned that it is fiercely user-centered, customer-centered, and its ultimate goal, again, is still to create a solution, but it's not only focused on the user, it's also trying to be something that is technologically, economically feasible and sustainable. So there's a little bit more depth to this process than just solving a problem. It's also figuring out who really and ultimately matters in this process. So I'm just going to end our poll now and share the results here. Again, most of us are on a computer laptop, about 76%, about 16% on a phone, and 8% on a tablet. So I appreciate you all for giving that information. It's hugely helpful for me as an instructor and a presenter to understand what type of technology you're all using as you're taking part in this process. So I do have one other question that I'm going to ask, and I'm going to put this up as I start the next slide here. But while this was intended to be a live workshop at the Abington campus, we opened this up to Zoom, and I apologize for not having more options in this poll, but I do want to ask you, where are you enrolled? And I just have Abington or other, but I wanted to see how that information came back. So let me get into design thinking and what it is. And the process has 5 different pieces to it. And the first one is empathy, to empathize. And that process is really connecting yourself with particularly your customers, but more than just the people, connecting to their stories, their emotions, their challenges that they're facing. And what you're doing is different than sympathizing and saying, I understand. What you're trying to do is to actually develop your own insights about that. So it's not just that you might understand that your customer is frustrated with delivery time, or they're challenged because of the cost of the product is too high. What you want to do is take that a step further and make that overall empathetic connection to start understanding through your own world how these other individuals, your customers, are actually engaging and feeling the challenges and the problems that are coming up. And I think this is a critical step, and it's actually one of the things that really draws me to design thinking as a process, because to me, empathy is one of the most important skill sets. I would say 21st century skill sets, but I think it's always been a critically important component for business, leadership, communication. Empathy is an important part of being able to connect with others. And one of the things that I was looking at when I was preparing for today's session was what things are amplified. If you have a strong ability to empathize with others, what other skills get amplified or enhanced because of that empathy? And what I found was some things that we were talking about. I think connection is an obvious thing, considering I told you that empathy is all about connecting with others. But it goes deeper than this. And I think these are great skills that if you had these on your resume, if you had this ability, you'd be fiercely employable for a lot of different places. So again, empathy helps and amplifies your ability to identify needs of others. Again, seems obvious, but it also helps with your creativity, your negotiation skills, and your collaboration. And when I think of things that I'm looking for in the leaders of today and tomorrow, particularly creative and collaborative individuals are things that I think matter greatly. So this first step, I think, puts you in a space and a place to be in a position to lead and amplify the skills that you have, and be valuable not only to your customers, but to who anyone might be employing you or potentially employing you. These are skills, and empathy, I think, is one of those key words that will help bring value to you moving forward as a young professional or even just a student. Building this skill set is incredibly important and valuable. All right, so empathy is step one. Step two really starts to look at now defining your problem. So this is oftentimes where we start with a more traditional problem solving process. Is we try to analyze what the issues are, and then we jump into coming up with potential solutions. So it's not that it's too far off of a traditional problem solving process. It's just that there's a couple spaces and places that are a bit different. So once we get past trying to understand the challenges our customers are facing, we now sit back and we analyze that interaction with the customer. And we try to synthesize, we try to create new meaning and understanding and definitions of the challenges that are ahead for that project. So the definition stage is probably what we're most familiar with as problem solvers, as leaders, is trying to create a way that we can articulate and communicate what the definition of the challenge, the problem is. So it's not only creating a starting point of the problem, here's where we are today, but it's also trying to figure out where do we need to get to, where we would know that our problem will be solved, our solution will be implemented and work. So definition is kind of creating the boundaries of the beginning of the challenge, but also where the end state is and how do we know that we've actually completed that process. And the next thing you, oh, sorry, that was my fault, wrong button. So the next thing you get to is a stage that's, again, a little bit different, actually I think a lot different than traditional problem solving, which is now you start going through a phase 3, which is ideation, coming up with ideas. And again, different than problem solving, traditional problem solving, where you're trying to find the one right idea and you might be maybe restricted or feel restricted in putting out different ideas. The ideation phase is totally focused on the quantity of ideas and not worried about the quality of ideas. So your job here is to come up with rapid fire, quick ideas. They might be silly, they might be crazy, but the point is we want to populate our potential universe of solutions with as many different possibilities as we can. This is very different, I think, from traditional problem solving, which is trying to narrow down as quickly as possible to the one right solution. What we're trying to do is we're trying to create a universe of as close to infinite number of possible solutions as we can, even if they're crazy, even if we don't have the technology or the resources to implement it. The hope is to build a very vast and open universe full of ideas first. Build those things first. And again, this tends to be a bit of a challenge. It tends to feel maybe difficult to come up with those ideas. My guess is a lot of people do come up with the ideas, but we might feel pressure or stress to say, I don't want to say that out loud. People might think it's silly or not good. And again, the value of doing an ideation process is we're not evaluating the ideas. We're collecting all ideas are all equal at this stage. And I think that's a very different role than what we're used to in a traditional problem solving process. But you're trying to open up and expand the creative possibilities that may be out there as a way to solve a problem. All right, 2 more stages to go for this, and then we'll pause for some questions. So if you have some questions about any of the things we're talking about, drop them in the chat. I've got a couple more things we're going to talk about, 2 more stages, and we'll try to answer some questions here in a moment before we get into how is business using this today in a way to create enhanced value for their customers by understanding their problems and their challenges. So the 4th stage, once we have empathized, defined, ideated, we now get into the 4th stage, which is prototyping. So starting to put some of those selected ideas that we think bear the most value, starting to evaluate those and put them into a space where we want to begin working on small papers, presentations, poster presentations are something that we do a lot in school, which I think are incredibly valuable in a way for you to distill and synthesize complex ideas into something that is understandable by more people. So I highly suggest you think about prototyping as, again, part of the process. And when we do things like outline papers, research papers, or we do posters for our large papers, this is all a great way to begin prototyping. It can also be building actual models like this. But what I would highly suggest is to think about how prototypes could be scaled to what's called a minimum viable product level. And this MVP is what it's typically called in some of the processes. So MVP, you might know from particularly from sports context as most valuable player. And I'm going to put up a poll here in a second. And I know we have a question of Maris. I'm going to actually get to that in just a second. So I'm going to come over to you, but I'm going to put up a poll, and then I'm going to come over to Maris to maybe address this question. Hang on one second. So I'm just going to put up a poll. I'm an NBA fan. I like basketball, and now there's nothing to watch. So this I thought was going to be a very interesting season. So I'm just going to put up, if you don't watch the NBA, no problem. It doesn't matter. You can still vote. It doesn't matter to me. But I'm just going to put up a poll here. Who was the most valuable player in the NBA this season? You can vote for who I think were probably the most likely, Giannis Antetokounmpo. And I hope I said that well. LeBron James or someone else. You can vote for anyone at this point. But Amaris, I'm going to come over to you real quick. Go ahead, Amaris.
Okay, so one of the questions we got was, would you be able to give an example of where every step is taken in a business? Like those, like where empathy you could consider.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I will. So I'm going to start with, just because it's most convenient for me, I'm going to start with the MVP, the prototyping, where that comes in. And hopefully I'll wrap around to a couple other spaces. We're going to look at Wawa as an example here in a moment, as a way that I think they use this really well. So I'm going to talk about them in just a moment, but let me start with how are businesses using this minimum viable product example as a way to look at this. So there was a company that was actually started by some students in a university business plan contest. The company's called Owlette, and the process was they wanted to be able to measure the pulse oximetry, which measures pulse and oxygen levels in blood. So if you've ever gone to the doctor when they put that little clamp on your finger and then a couple of seconds later it has like a little red flashing light, it's taking your pulse, it's measuring your pulse and the oxygen levels in your blood. And it's really not a big deal for you. You take this little clamp, put it on your finger, you sit still for a couple of seconds and they get the information they need. But these gentlemen that worked on this company were identifying a problem. They were empathizing. All right, so maybe I can do this better than I thought, Amaris. So they're empathizing and understanding that for nurses, this might be a challenge in that when you're working with a baby. So their fingers are smaller. And actually, I think for children, they oftentimes put it on their toe because it's a little bit bigger than a finger. But babies, particularly infants, they don't really have the ability to just say, hey, sit still for 10 seconds so I can do this thing. They don't have that control. Their muscles are kind of all over the place, and you put a cold thing on their toe, they're going to usually kick it away. So these gentlemen were empathizing and starting to understand that for some of these nurses, their jobs would be more efficient if there was maybe a better way to take and measure this pulse oximetry. So they started working on a sock that would go onto the foot of an infant and measure that. And actually, let me, excuse me, let me go back actually a step. The first thing they started with was they thought they could do this via Bluetooth by removing the cord, making this a little bit easier to put on the toe of a child. And what you're seeing here is actually their minimum viable product. They basically built a circuit board, they put on a Bluetooth mechanism, they had the connections, and basically what they were trying to do was to make the lives a little bit easier for these nurses. So they made this connection and they tested it, and it looked like this, which no one would ever buy something like this because it's got loose wires and connections, and it's just not what you would buy as a finished product. But this is the minimum viable product. This is how you test it at a scale to see, does it solve the problem that we want? We can fix it up, we can paint it, we can make it look nicer eventually, which they eventually did. They eventually made it look like this, which is the sock. They integrated it into a phone application to make it a little bit easier for people to utilize. And ultimately, they made this move from having this be on the foot of a child in a doctor's office. They moved it to more of a home use, largely because they found that the hospitals weren't really interested in investing in new hardware, more expensive, and ultimately maybe it saves a few minutes out of the nurse's life in collecting this information. They really didn't see this as a problem. But what they found was that particularly for new parents, they really felt a need to be able to monitor some of these pieces of information from their children. So they actually made it as a home application so that a parent could put their child to bed, put the sock on their foot, and they'd be able to check in the middle of the night to see that the child is breathing right, oxygen's flowing, things are working well. So they went from that minimum viable product to something that looked like this, based upon getting the product into the hands of users and then getting feedback to find out that nurses would never actually use this because the hospitals would have to make the purchasing decisions, and it didn't seem that that was a critical purchase for them. So when they transitioned the problem to parents, new parents, they identified new ways to make the product a finished product, and that's where this format came out. So that's a little bit about empathy and also the ideation part, right? Where people were starting to think about how might this be used, where might it be used, hospitals maybe, home use maybe, and ultimately trying to finalize and figure out where you're going to take your prototype and test, and then ultimately get it working. So thanks again for submitting to the poll. This is, I'm surprised, we'll share this results here. LeBron James came out as the top vote getter here for the MVP of the basketball season. We'll send something over to people in a moment. There is a great video if you're interested in seeing how this process is utilized more. You can go to YouTube, and there's about a 15-minute video of the presentation from Owlette that goes through and talks about how they went through the stages of empathy and minimum viable product and testing this to figure out ultimately where this product wound up on the market. So what I would suggest is if you just search Owlette here, Owlette business competition in YouTube, you're going to see a video, and I think it's a great way for you to get some information about this. It's a wonderful way that they present, and I highly encourage, particularly if students are interested in participating in things like business idea competitions, case competitions, you're really going to get a great feel of how they utilize this design thinking process to develop solutions that mattered to their customers. But also when they hit a roadblock, they were able to jump and pivot to an alternate solution so that they could keep going, that this process could keep going. So I encourage you to take a look at that. I'll see if I can find the link in a moment for you guys. I'm going to just hit the fifth and final of the stages of the process for design thinking, which is to test. And that's get your minimum viable product in the hands of users, let them pick it up, let them hold it, let them try to see if it actually does solve their problem, and get feedback from them. And ultimately what happens with the test is you're going to get valuable information. And the critical part of design thinking is, while the testing stage is the final stage, it's also the pathway that then what you do is you iterate. You go all the way back to the beginning and you empathize. And as you're listening to the results of your test, you're empathizing with the user and sharing that information. So Amaris found the link, so absolutely you can share it with the group, please, if you can. So Amaris will share to the group the link to that Owlette video. So testing is the gateway to receiving feedback. And then you go with this loop all the way back to the beginning of the process, back to empathy, and you take some of the information you're hearing from your potential customers, and you empathize again, and you start this process over and over and over again. So design thinking is a never-ending, we call it an iterative process, where it just iterates. It goes through level 1, level 2, level 3. We just keep going and going and going and never stop this process of empathizing, defining, ideating, prototyping, testing, and then iterate, come back to it again. So again, in my mind, different than traditional problem solving that has kind of a beginning and end. This is an ongoing process where you continue to grow and build on your ideas as they're coming up. All right, so thank you guys. So I'm going to talk about this in a little bit of context here in a moment about, we're going to look at Wawa as one of the examples. And I do have another poll. I know most of the people on the call are from the Abington area at least, but so if you're in the eastern part of the state, Wawa tends to be seen as king, but I know Alan is from a little bit west of there, and he might feel differently. We have some other convenience options out in the west part of the state. So I just wanted to ask, which do you think is better, Sheetz or Wawa? I will share with you, my vote is 100% Sheetz. I am a Sheetz person, and I always get yelled at, and people do not like that. Where I am out here when I'm teaching in the Philadelphia area. So if you're getting that poll, I don't know if it's coming up or not, but if you can take that poll, which one do you prefer, Sheetz or Wawa as a convenience store? They're both gas stations. They both serve food, and it gives you an option to access some made-to-order food, coffee, lots of good things happening at both of those places, but there tends to be a geographic divide in that people in the eastern portion of the state tend to greatly prefer Wawa, but the further west I go, particularly once I get to about Harrisburg, things change quite drastically, and Sheetz becomes the preferred option. So I'm not sure if that poll is working, though. It doesn't seem to be going up. I'm going to try to relaunch it. All right, let me see if that one works. So I put it back up. All right, now it seems to be working. Oh, wow. All right. So I'm surprised we got some Sheetz people. So thank you, Sheetz people, for voting for this. But we're going to give this as an example. I'm going to talk about what Wawa has done to try to empathize and understand the customers, trying to use a design thinking process to create an atmosphere that is not only excellent for their customers, but also a space and place where they're thriving as a business. And Wawa is a thriving business in the region. And what I'm going to start with is just a quick story on how they focus on jobs to be done. This is a process. There's a great video out. I think it's Clayton Christensen was a business consultant, and he worked with some of the largest companies on how to better connect with customers, how to create product lines that were mattered and valued. This is an interesting poll today. So we've got much more evenly split than I thought. So the Sheetz people really represented today. But these jobs to be done is a different way, I think, of looking at problems and how we do business by focusing on the jobs that our products or services do. And it sounds maybe a silly way to put it, and it might seem obvious that you would buy a milkshake, like this Dairy Queen milkshake up here. You would buy a milkshake because the job to be done is you wanted a milkshake. But my guess is that there's other things you could hire. And Clayton Christensen, his video, again, a good one to search for on YouTube, is he talks about jobs to be done as we can hire several different items. So if you went to Dairy Queen, you absolutely could obviously hire a milkshake. You could also hire a blizzard. You could hire a sundae, a banana split. There's lots of things you could hire, but you didn't have to go to Dairy Queen. You might have been interested in some kind of other dessert. So you might have gotten a donut. I don't know what else there is for dessert. I'm blanking on this at the moment, but there's lots of desserts that you can go get. So the point is, jobs to be done are, we're actually selecting, almost like we're interviewing potential candidates. So I could have hired a milkshake. I could have hired a sundae. I could have hired a banana split. I also could have gone to Dunkin' Donuts and gotten a donut. Maybe I went to Starbucks and I got a Frappuccino. There's lots of different ways that we can look at this. So the story of how the process of using design thinking in business happens is starting with jobs to be done. And the story goes, as Clayton Christian tells it way far better than I do, is he was working for a large company, I believe it was McDonald's, and they were asked to be brought in to enhance the amount of milkshakes to be sold. So what was happening was sales were starting to flatten out for milkshakes at McDonald's. So they brought in some consultants and said, we would like to see the milkshake sales grow. Consultants came in, they solved the problem, which is we only sell basically vanilla chocolate and strawberry milkshakes. If we give people more choices, they're going to buy more milkshakes. So McDonald's went out, they started and they experimented with all kinds of different flavors of milkshakes, chocolate chip cookie dough, all kinds of different things. They had to bring in new equipment, find new vendors, get new products. And what they found out was people were buying the exact same amount of total milkshakes after this trial period. So that was their kind of prototyping testing. So they were buying more varieties of flavors of milkshakes, but the exact same number of milkshakes were being bought. That's where Clayton Christensen came in and asked this question, but what job does a milkshake actually solve for people? So they went in and they actually started identifying and documenting who was buying milkshakes. And they came up with a really interesting observation, which was that a majority of the milkshakes being sold at McDonald's were being bought before 8 a.m. So I'm going to ask you guys a question. Have you ever eaten a milkshake for breakfast? That's something I've never heard of, but it seems like a lot of people buy milkshakes for breakfast. So I'm going to throw this poll up here because I've never really found anyone that, so I have now found someone that eats a milkshake for breakfast, 2 people that have found milkshakes for breakfast. So I've never done it, but what they were finding was people were hiring milkshakes for breakfast. Instead of bagels or pancakes and sausage, instead of bacon, egg, and cheese, instead of bananas that they could eat in the car, they were actually coming into the drive-through and ordering milkshakes. And what they started to do is they were empathizing and understanding was that people wanted something convenient that they could hold in their hand, put it into their cup holder in their car, drive to work, something that was convenient but still filling and took a little bit of time to eat. It didn't make a mess in their car, those kinds of things. So as they were trying to now figure out what was stopping people from buying a milkshake every morning, it seems like something popped up, which is it's ice cream for breakfast. And maybe one of the things that was stopping people from buying more milkshakes was not that they didn't like the milkshakes, not that there weren't great flavors to choose from, but that there's also a little, at least in my mind, there's a little bit of guilt that comes along with having basically ice cream for breakfast, although 4 of you apparently are willing to give that a shot. That's fine, you're bold. But that was something that they started to identify might be a reason why people were not buying more milkshakes, was that there was some guilt that went along with it as they made that purchase maybe once or twice a week, and was preventing them from buying more milkshakes. So ultimately, instead of trying to solve the problem of how do we solve the problem of selling more milkshakes, understanding the job to be done, which was I needed a convenient, fast, non-messy way to eat breakfast while driving to work. That's the job that milkshakes were solving for a lot of people. And once they figured out the barrier, the pain was, how do we have something that's convenient, fits in my hand, fits in my cup holder, I can eat it on my way to work as I'm driving, and it doesn't make a mess, but it also doesn't come along with guilt. This is where I believe you start seeing things like the fruit smoothies get developed at the fast food restaurants as a less guilt heavy solution to that same job to be done. I want something that I can get quickly and fast into my car, be on the road, and I don't feel guilty in having to say, what did you have for breakfast? I said a milkshake. Sounds very different than what did you have for breakfast? Oh, I had a strawberry banana smoothie. If you probably look at the calorie content, they're probably not very much different. There's a lot of sugar in those things, but the point is, this is what led some of the largest fast food chains, particularly, to start offering some of these fruit smoothie options as an alternative job to be done. Give you something convenient to travel with in the car on your way to work. So now, as you start looking at companies like Wawa, you hopefully can start seeing that the food choices that they have, the beverage choices, the way they're laid out, the way they choose locations for their new convenience stores. I'm struggling to try to figure out, what do I call a Wawa, because they've actually tried to reposition themselves as they've started to understand their customers. They want something convenient, but gas and convenience store items like milk and eggs and those kinds of things, that's not really the thing that draws people to a Wawa. It's that they are now repositioned through this design thinking process as more of a restaurant with convenience items and gasoline attached to this restaurant. So they've switched the focus. The primary focus for Wawa's now is more on the restaurant side of things. But what I share with you as one of the things when I think about Wawa is that I believe their mind is so focused on convenience that when you look at the food items that they have, it's influencing everything. This design thinking process, this focus on jobs to be done, is influencing even the food options that they have. So one thing that if I put up a few items from Sheetz that you would see, and it's the reason why I prefer Sheetz, is that they have fried food. So if you go to a Sheetz, you can get things like, I eat a lot of fried mozzarella sticks. I'm not going to lie. I spent several years taking class at Penn State Harrisburg, and I would drive home at night and I would stop at Sheetz and I would get coffee and mozzarella sticks pretty much every night, sometimes onion rings, but they're also fried. You can't really get those things at Wawa. You can get some mozzarella sticks, but they're baked. And if you like the baked mozzarella sticks, we need to discuss. I'll take you to lunch at Sheetz and I'll show you what a nice fried mozzarella stick tastes like. It's excellent. I'm also going to recommend the tacos. I know it sounds strange. Gas station tacos, probably not something you want to do. They're excellent. They actually fried the taco shells fresh for you. It's an excellent choice. But go to Wawa and you're not going to find French fries, onion rings, mozzarella sticks, and those kinds of foods don't typically appear at your local Wawa. And the reason I believe why is that there's when you work fryers, and I haven't, but I've had students that have worked at restaurants where they have to fry food, is sometimes if you get 2 or 3 orders for French fries coming in, yeah, I'm going to get the first 2 batches out to you in 5 minutes, but the next person, they're going to have to wait 10 minutes to get their French fries, and that is not convenient. So when you look at the menus that you see at Wawa, macaroni and cheese, it's made, we keep it hot in the same sections where we have soup. If someone comes in and orders 1 bowl, we have it ready for them in a minute. If someone comes in and orders 10 bowls, we have it ready for them in 2 minutes. Sandwiches and hoagies, same thing. We can offer quality food, but we don't sacrifice the convenience of saying, today when you came in, it's going to be a 15-minute wait for your food, as opposed to yesterday when you ordered the exact same thing, it was only 2 minutes. Wawa has, in my mind, they've really mastered this ability of understanding the jobs to be done, which is I want high quality food, convenient and customized. And they do that, I think, better than anybody. And I definitely think they do it better than Sheets, although I still prefer Sheets. But I also think that it's influenced their decisions. I think that they probably could sell more French fries than Sheets ever could, except it would come at a cost, which is it would start diminishing the convenience factor that's associated with their food that they've chosen. So they've taken this empathy, definition, ideation, prototyping, and testing, and their understanding and listening to their customers. And even though the customers might say to them, we would love if I could order some French fries or mozzarella sticks at the Wawa, when they go back and they try that and test it, my guess is that people are coming back and saying, yeah, but I didn't want to sacrifice the convenience to get those food options, which is why you're looking at these kinds of foods and coffees, is that it is a way to offer, again, high quality food, but without sacrificing the convenience and consistency of the experience. So I'm going to just show you one last slide, and then we'll wrap up and take some questions. But what I want you to recognize is that, and this might be a bit hard to see, I apologize. Jobs last, but products don't. And this is a pie chart from 1983, looking at how people bought and consumed music. Man, that is a long time ago, 40 years ago now. So we're talking almost 40 years ago now. How did people consume music? And the reality was, a majority of music was bought on vinyl records. So I probably should have had a poll. Have you ever bought a vinyl record? I literally just got one delivered, just came to the house last week. So right before this workshop, I was listening to a record. I don't know why, probably because I'm old, I still listen to music that way. Cassette tapes, that was another about 50%. And CDs were just emerging. They were 0.5% of the market. But the reality is most music was consumed on a physical material, either a piece of vinyl or a cassette tape or even a compact disc. Today, that the job to be done is people still want to listen to music. So that job never changed, but the technology did. And now most people are streaming music. So you don't have a physical copy. You're grabbing your phone and you access an app, and all of your music is there for you to listen to. So we've transitioned away from having that physical ownership of a product and gone to more of an access way to solve the problem. So instead of buying a purchase of, I'm going to buy a collection of 10 or 12 songs, you're now renting access to a portal that has millions of songs for you to listen to at any one point in time. The job never changed. I would like to listen to music, but the technology and the way we can create a business around that has completely changed in the past 37 years of how we looked at music, and it's going to change again and again and again. So the point is, jobs last, but products and services don't. They will continue to change and iterate as technology changes, as people's way they communicate their problems changes. These things will continually adjust and change across the market, right? So that's basically it. And I hope I don't know that I ever really covered how does a business utilize all of those steps, but I think it's embedded in oftentimes the DNA of how organizations work, is this empathy, define, ideate, prototype, and test process. If you can do those things, you can be quicker. It doesn't necessarily mean you're better, but you're more than likely to try new things. And I think this ideation phase right in the middle is the piece that matters, in my mind, may matter the most, which is you need a culture, a system that says, we're going to value, again, the quantity of ideas created by an organization and less focused on quality. So having a culture that encourages creativity, collaboration, ideation, is not something that is common everywhere, because oftentimes we still want to have a single problem with a single solution. This design thinking process is much more open and collaborative, and that means we're going to have 900 ideas that we chose not to pursue. It doesn't mean that we're going to completely say that they're wrong, but it means that we're going to not pursue them. We're going to test some, and we might find that they're also that they didn't work. But the point is, we're trying to come up with a better solution that is more focused on the customer than what we could create without having this process available. All right, so that's what I wanted to cover with you guys today. So sorry, it was just kind of me talking to you most of the time. The hope was this would have been a bit more lively in person. I could have had you up writing on whiteboards and playing around with us a little bit more. But if you have any questions or comments, I'd be more than happy to listen to them. I'm just going to jump over to Amaris quick. Amaris, anything else on my end? Anything I can or should cover before we wrap up for the day?
Not really.
All right. Let me see. I think I have one more poll. We'll see if I'll put this out here. I'm just going to ask you again, now that you're aware that Sheetz has things like mozzarella sticks that are fried, they're excellent. I'm just going to ask you again, are you sure? Like Wawa won the last time. I'm just going to throw this out there one more time. Are you sure? Because if not, maybe what we need to do is we'll go take a visit, and we'll go up to Sheetz, and we'll get you guys some tacos, and we'll get you some mozzarella sticks. I don't know why I like mozzarella sticks as much as I do. All right, I think we got a couple more people on the Sheetz bandwagon here. So as we're finishing up with the poll, thank you guys for playing along. I'm still learning a lot of things with Zoom and trying to do some things like polls. And we'll see how it goes, and hopefully we'll get better at all this as we go along. But if you have any questions, I'm still here for a few more minutes. If you need anything, I'd love to listen to any further questions. Thank you guys for participating and still engaging with the Startup Week activities. We greatly appreciate it, and hopefully we'll get back to some more things where we can see each other face to face. But at the bare minimum, this is also something that we want to say, even if we can't be together face to face. If you have comments, questions, how can we make a virtual meeting more accessible, more engaging, more valuable to you as students? I'd be happy to listen to that as well. And I do want to thank Alan for spending time with us today and encouraging his students as well to stop out and join us. I do greatly appreciate that time. And I'm just going to end the poll now because it looks really good for Sheetz right now. So I probably shouldn't do that. I think that's like, it's frowned upon in a democracy, but it's the problem. When I have the mouse here, I can click it when I like it. So it looks a little bit better. So Sheetz got maybe got a little bit of an elevated numbers here. So while I'm drunk with power, I'm going to stop that and return you guys to normal. So if you have anything else, so I got a question here, a quick review of Define. So yeah, so this is I think what we typically try to do as maybe a first step in traditional problem solving is we try to come up with a definition. So if you were writing a research paper, it's where you come up with your hypothesis statement. You start saying, I believe that people would buy more milkshakes because, back to the milkshake, I believe people would buy more milkshakes, but there's not enough flavor options. And maybe that's from our position, we're saying, 3 flavors isn't enough. If we gave people more options, people love choice and customization. If we give people more choice, they'll be able to buy more products. So this is the process now where what we're doing as researchers, as business people, is we're looking at a phenomenon happening. People are buying products out in the world, and we're trying to make sense of that. And the defining process is I have to put words from my brain around what I am observing in the outside world. So I'm observing a problem that says we would love to sell more milkshakes, and my definition, it might be very different than what someone else would define. because we're all biased. You know, I've lived a life different than everyone else in the room. We might even go to a same event and see something, the exact same, observe the exact same things happen, but because I might have a different background, different cultural values, I might interpret things differently. So the defining process is something that is important to do, but what's happening is we're taking the problem from our customer's world, and the process of defining moves it now into our world. We as the business or the researcher or the consultant now needs to give structure and boundary to what we're going to try to solve with our next steps of ideation and testing and prototyping, prototyping and testing. So the definition is really the transition from concept, and how we define the problem is now going to dictate how we start producing potential solutions. So this oftentimes can be a challenging process for companies, particularly there's usually not just one person making decisions on what those definitions are. And this is where I think it matters to have a good bit of diversity, not just race, gender, ethnicity, those kinds of things. I'm talking about experiences, perspectives on life. Those things I think help in this process of defining, so that you're getting all these different perspectives come into the equation, so that when you put this definition statement, you know, your hypothesis statement, your definition statement of what the problem is, that it has multiple perspectives that are coming in and creating ultimately the definition you're going to work with to now start implementing your solutions. All right, cool. Anything else? How do I determine, sorry, Jacob, I got you. How do you determine which ideas from the ideate phase are worthwhile enough to move to the prototyping phase? Again, I think this is subjective, right? So you're going to put all these ideas on the board in a bucket somewhere. You're going to start putting them everywhere. And ultimately, you're going to have conversations, you're going to have discussions. It's back to some of these skills that come out of collaboration. So creativity, negotiation, and collaboration were three of the skill sets that I shared with you are elevated or amplified when you have strong skills to empathize. And I think if you can use those three things as you're looking at this broad collection of ideas, is going to help you to select the handful of ones that might be possible to move forward. Some of them might just self-select out because you don't have the skill, the resources to produce that solution. But ways that I've worked with this with some clients is we take just a big whiteboard. I give everybody a whole bunch of Post-it notes, and we start writing ideas all over them, and we just plaster them all over the room. And then people just start walking around the room and talking and sharing, what did you mean when you said this? And what happens is we start really then coming with certain ideas start rising closer to the top. So to me, it's still a process of, you still have to process and evaluate which of those are going to become the most valuable. So even though I say we're not evaluating for quality of idea during the ideation process, we do have to move into an evaluation phase so that we can move to the prototype, because I think it was Jacob that asked. Because once you only have limited resources that you can take into the prototyping phase. So the beginning of ideation is all about no judgment, no evaluation. Let's just get quantity over quality. But eventually you do have to transition. I think that's what you're hitting on, Jacob, is that we can't take 1,000 ideas to the prototyping stage. We do have to eventually move into that process of evaluating which ones are the most likely for us to pursue moving forward. So I think you're on that, and there's a bunch of different ways that you can, again, processes that you can evaluate and narrow down those ideas. Some of them are just having conversations where you walk around the room. I've done some exercises with classes where we try different decision-making techniques in evaluating what that looks like. And but the process to me should be not one person, it should be a collaborative effort. And again, there should be some negotiation built into that process as well. All right, anything else before we wrap? All right. Maris, thanks for co-hosting again. I'm just going to toss it over to you to wrap us up, and then we'll head out. But if you need to track us down, you can track me down, Peter Hornberger at Penn State Abington. You can shoot me an email, and I'd be happy to send you some more information on this topic.
If you guys have any other comments or questions, you could just type it in the chat or email me, or even email Peter. Other than that, I feel like this was just really valuable. And the whole time I was kind of taking notes just for, it's a really cool idea of, how do you say? It's a really cool idea because you really work on the people's emotions to try to have them purchase your product. And either way, it's like what we learned yesterday, it's mission first and money second. So you work on creating like a bond with the customer, and then they buy your product later. But this was valuable to me. I was writing notes the entire time about how I intend to like use this for further business.
All right. So while we still have some people, we're going to try something. I tried this yesterday. I don't know if it'll work again or not, but it's been a challenging time to move everything online. I miss seeing people. I'm not a hugely social person to begin with, but so one of the things I'm going to ask people to do, if you want, this is completely voluntary. I'm going to put on, if you have a camera, you want to put it on. We're going to try to do kind of a workshop selfie. So I'll take a screenshot. I'm going to try to get as many people's cameras up on my screen. So if you have a camera and you want to participate, I'm going to take a screenshot, and we'll do a kind of a selfie of the event, the class. Thank you guys. A couple people are logging on. Yeah, fix your hair. I don't have to fix my hair. I've taken steps. I got rid of it all. It's all gone. Cool. Thank you guys. Imagine how much money I save on soap, shampoo. Like, I haven't bought shampoo for a decade. It's great. All right, cool. So thank you guys. I'm going to take a picture in, all right, let's do 1, 2, 3. Are you ready? So 1, 2, 3. All right. Now I'm also known for messing things up. So hang in there. Give me 1 second to make sure I actually got the image. I did. All right, I'm going to do one more just in case somebody was like looking away or something like that. All right, I see Jackie fixing her hair. I'm good, right? All right, we're good. All right, ready? Wait, hold on. Now I look like I'm weird. All right, ready? 1, 2. Hold on, I messed up, Jack. All right, you ready? 1, 2, 3. All right, cool. I think I got a good picture. I will find a way to. Well, actually, let me share it with you guys right now. Hang on, so you can see what we all look like, because I can do that. It's the 21st century. I can do all kinds of cool stuff. So thank you guys for playing along. Oh, where is it? That's not what I wanted. Sorry. Hang on. Let me get this right. Oh, man.
And I'll see most of you in class in 25 minutes.
Yeah. Sorry, Mr. Dillon. I am. Oh,
You want to join our class?
No, man, I need a nap. Like, I have been, I'm overwhelmed. I'm not going to lie. This has been a crazy. So I finally found it. Hang on. It's coming up in just a second. All right. So there you go. Sorry, I cut some people off on this, but you're not cut off in the real picture, just in the. So can you see that? I hope you can see it. All right. So thank you guys for the selfie. I don't know. Some just weird things I'm trying to see if we can make this a little bit more human as we teach. Thank you, Jacob. I appreciate it. All right, y'all. That's all I have. I'm going to go have some lunch. Some of you guys have to go to Mr. Dillon's class, but thanks again to Marisa, Alan, Dylan, for you guys being on. Everybody else, I appreciate it. So thanks, guys. Go have a good day and enjoy. I think it's a nice day. So also, if you can get some sunlight on you, it helps. Moves your spirits. All right. Thanks, guys.